Hello, everyone. This is Diego Isola, founder at Tavano Team, and today I'm joined by Rodrigo Alonso, the CEO of Tavano Team, and Brent Bell, the CEO of BigCommerce. Yes, we have the CEO of BigCommerce with us today, and it's going to be a very, very special episode. I can't believe that Brent was so kind to spend 90 minutes of his time with us, really discussing about the industry, what he's forecasting for the future, what's going on right now with AI and everything that you already know. But also, he talks about his life, his challenges, his childhood, and how he was able to become the CEO of BigCommerce. Within that conversation, we go through some of big names like the role that he played in eBay and PayPal. And he shares some things that I didn't even know that he was a part of. Things that really shape the way we do business and we transact globally, everyone. I'm very excited to present to you this episode because it's really worth it. Let's get right into it now. Thank you. It's very exciting for us to have the opportunity to be in this virtual table with you, chatting today. And so, where you join us from?
Austin, Texas, United States.
Austin, Texas. So
Yep.
Good. Yeah, that looks like your office, right?
You bet.
So we're just so you know, we're in our offices here down in Uruguay, Montevideo, which is kind of close to the region, within a region where you have some fun memories, I believe. Is that true?
That's right. Back in 2002, my girlfriend, now wife, was living in Buenos Aires, and after 4 years of dating, I flew down there and proposed to her in Argentina. Actually, technically on the Argentina side of Iguazu Falls.
Iguazu Falls. That's beautiful, beautiful. All right. So, well, again, thanks again for being here today with us. I think one of the things when we're talking with Rodrigo, some of the topics that we want to go through, one of the things that looks very, very interesting, super interesting for us, is your path on how you become the CEO of BigCommerce, right? I mean, you're in a unique spot when you're managing one of the most important e-commerce platforms in the world, right? And your decisions truly can have an impact in the industry, in the e-commerce space. So many people such as us will definitely like to know how you were able to get there, right? But before we go there, I think it would be very nice to know your early stages, like your childhood, when you were a boy, your upbringing. I mean, so many things from the past sit with us forever and have an effect when we're an adult, right? I mean, and just so you know, in my case, for example, what I'm going to share right now, really quick, is something that has to do with the fact that we are the three of us are here today. My mother and my father obviously had a big role in who I am, but my father in particular, who passed away when I was 12 years old, is probably one of the main reasons why Tavano Team exists, because before he died, probably 2 years before he died, he showed me, and I was 11, 12 at that time, and he was able to start a new business right from scratch. He didn't have much resources, but he defied the situation and created a new company. And I was not understanding much of life at that point, but I was an observer, right? And as an observer, that kind of sit with me. And Tavano Team, the name of the agency, it actually comes from, Tavano was the name of my father's sailboat that when I was around 8 years old, we go with him and his friends, the sailing outings and travel, within near the port. But still, I mean, there was a lot of collaboration and a lot of organization, even structuring the roles that they had. which again, me not understanding much of life and as an observer, I was kind of inspired by that in a way, because when there was a time when I wanted to start my own business, start my own agency, I wanted kind of like teamwork to be in the core of the team of the agency, right? And I thought about Tavano, which I reinforced it with team afterwards. So again, a quick example of how things that happened to us in the early ages do have a lot of impact, and which at the end of the day is also something that has to do with us being here today. So, but I know that you have a very interesting story. So if you would like to share with us, that would be awesome.
Well, thanks for sharing your story, Diego. I guess the relevant aspects are my mom and dad both come from a small farming town in southern Illinois called Carlinville. It's about 50 miles south of Springfield, very rural, corn and soybeans. Dad's side were farmers, mom's side were community bankers. And, you know, my parents married, had me, my brother, divorced, remarried, and then divorced again. But the second time they divorced, it was after having moved out west to the Rocky Mountains, and in particular to a place where it was a sort of a heavily religious community, and we were not of that religion. And also, you know, sort of a broken divorce family, we sort of stuck out like a sore thumb in the neighborhood. And so I, you know, from a very early age, I had a lot of self-consciousness that on the social hierarchy metric stick, I was bottom of the barrel, right? There's nothing I could do as a non-member of the dominant church in that area. There was nothing I could do to truly fit in. I'm age 6, age 7, and we're growing up, you know, single mom, elementary school teacher, trying to raise 3 kids, you know, 1,000 miles away from her family. We're poor, we're on food stamps, we're, you know, not part of the, you know, the main community in town. And as a kid, I had a choice of either sort of accepting being a low person on the social totem pole or coming up with a new totem pole that I wanted to climb. And I had role models in my extended family, again, back in rural Illinois, that were examples of the type of person I wanted to become. My grandfather, 2 of my uncles, you know, they had good families, good careers, and I said, I want to earn my way to that outcome, not the kind of outcome I'm growing up in. So I, in short, at age 6 or 7, believed that academic achievement in school would be something that could earn me the right to kind of grow out of poverty and grow out of that situation, you know, earn the ability to go to the college I wanted, or at least a good college. If I could do well there, I could get a good job, et cetera, et cetera. And I became, if not wired by birth, wired by circumstance, somebody who was extremely achievement-oriented and perfectionist. It's not that I think I'm perfect by any means, but I always want to push myself for the things that I choose to do to be as good and successful as possible. And, you know, for sure to this day, that is a mindset that I wake up with every morning. You know, every single day, I wake up, I first start working and get caught up on work, and then I'll get a quick workout in, and I will work out really, really hard trying to make myself as healthy as possible. And then I come into BigCommerce, and we're trying every single day to push ourselves to do better than any other e-commerce platform on planet Earth at serving the world's great businesses. I am, you know, truly, truly, truly motivated to outcompete and outserve, or at least do the best job we humanly can. I think the other part of my story that's relevant and that gets into e-commerce, when I went to college, I knew I wanted to go into business and have a career in business, but I didn't know what industry would interest me the most, and I didn't know what function or role within business. And I therefore did something that I knew was not in my sort of a job I wanted to have long term, but I thought it was a job that would educate me the most. I went into management consulting. And it's kind of a weird thing because you don't have any experience, but you can be very analytical, run a lot of numbers, and you get a series of clients in different industries, different problems, and you quickly start to see what industries or functions or types of problems interest you. And it was my goal to figure that out as quickly as I could. I got lucky. My first project was actually in agriculture, and it's like, oh, that was fun because I come from farming blood, but that's not what I wanted to do for my career. And the second one was sort of a nonprofit technology institute. The third was a retailer, one of the biggest retailers in the United States. They were trying to compete in a number of different formats and categories: discount, supercenter, sporting goods, books, and music. They had all these specialty retailers in addition to their core discount store. And they're trying to survive against tough competition from Walmart and the other big box new formats. I realized after a series of projects for that customer, I really liked retail. I like thinking about it from the side of the retailer. I like thinking about it from the side of the brands who sell through retailers, from the side of the consumer. And that was a weird career choice because in the early 1990s, retail was about as ugly a business as one could be. For anybody who wasn't named Walmart or Target or Home Depot or Best Buy, you're just getting your butt kicked by these new, very efficient, very scaled, big box retailers. And it was just a brutal race to the bottom of profitability for everybody other than them. Then I go off to business school in 1995, and in the middle of business school, all of a sudden the internet changes everything. Now, technically, the first ever e-commerce store was 1994, but it was really in that period of 95 to 97 that not just Amazon and eBay came along, but new websites, including some current BigCommerce customers, formed in that era. And by 98, it was rather clear that the internet was changing absolutely everything. Most importantly, because if you're a brand, if you're a manufacturer, B2C, or you're selling B2B, you're no longer limited by the stockists, the retailers or the distributors who buy your product, where they sell your product, what part of your range they carry, what inventory they have in stock or not, and how your story is told, which is usually not at all, because it's just products sitting on a store shelf or in a B2B warehouse. You now get to tell your story. And you can do it in as many ways as you want. Originally, it was your own website, but then content marketing, influencer marketing, third-party recommendations, all these things start to populate the internet because there's just no limit to what customers and experts can write about their experiences and love for different brands. You can now sell to anybody. You can sell anybody, and you can even work with your existing suppliers over time to complement what they choose to buy in inventory and stock with a broader range of SKUs, with greater inventory depth. You can go global, you can add brands. The internet changed absolutely everything for especially the brands and manufacturers, but also to retailers, now trying to compete against the big boxes and not being inherently disadvantaged by the smaller scale of their individual stores, relative to the really big box retailers. It changed everything. And so by 98, I had switched from offline retail to online retail, and that's just been my career ever since. When I was finally done consulting at the end of 99, I'd gotten myself out of debt from undergrad and business school. The last thing I'll say, and then I'll pause, is I could then leave consulting, and I had a choice in the height of the bubble at the end of 1999 in all of e-commerce. What business model do I most want to bet on? Do I want to go work for an online retailer? Do I want to go work for a given technology provider within e-commerce? And the model I picked was one of the first 4 American SaaS platforms, before SaaS was a term. They called it ASP back then. And there were 4. There was Yahoo Stores, Blue Martini, Volusion, and the one I joined, Escalate. Now, mine wasn't one of the winners ultimately, and I only ended up being there a year because within a year it was kind of clear that the model was right, but this wasn't the team or the tech that was going to pull it off. But I bet on that model because a lot of companies were actually choosing to spend $5-10 million at the time to cobble together the software and the hardware and do e-commerce in the early days with early tech. And what these couple of SaaS companies basically said is, you don't have to do it that way. We're going to give you the tools you need served up over the internet. And yeah, you'll have to do some systems integration on the back end, but you're not going to have to buy and license your own software and secure it and maintain it and version it and all that kind of stuff. We'll do that for you and we'll take a percentage of your sales, but you avoid the $5-10 million startup costs and the ongoing costs of operation in order to do that. Clearly, that is the model that is winning today, but it wasn't the model that won back then. It is true, Yahoo Stores by 2002 or 3 had gotten to about 3% share of stores globally by my count at the time. I could identify, I remember back in 2002, by which time I had moved on from Escalate to eBay and PayPal. There were 250 plus platforms in the world, and Yahoo Stores had the highest share of any of them by store count at about 3%.
But 250 of e-commerce platforms or of SaaS platforms?
Yeah, no, 250 general SaaS platforms.
Yeah.
No, all platforms.
So NetSuite before it was called NetSuite, was called NetLedger, and started in 1998 as a SaaS company. It was an ERP, mainly, obviously, as still is, but they had the opportunity, obviously, to run the e-commerce there. So the reason why I'm going, in my mind, I was going, okay, I remember Volusion, I remember Yahoo Stores. I started in 2005 in the, in this space, and I was a sales rep at that time, 2005, trying to get customers out of, or from offline to NetSuite and doing their e-commerce with NetSuite at that point. But also I was competing with Yahoo Stores and Volusion a lot. So yeah, I mean, and it was still at a point, 2005, it was kind of like a promise that the SaaS space would be the space. I mean, 1998, I understand what you're saying. Like, obviously, probably there was a huge step there, but it took a lot of time for people to be rest assured, for merchants to be rest assured that they can have the data stored somewhere else, not in the local servers, right? It took a lot of time.
Well, it was always a better model. It's just the companies didn't execute it well. I mean, like I said, Blue Martini and Escalate, the one I was at, didn't even last, 10 years. Yahoo Stores and Volusion are both still around, but they had the opportunity, if they had been really well run and managed to basically keep eliminating tech debt and modernizing their tech platform, they could be the Shopify and BigCommerce of today. But they didn't do it. Yahoo Stores was captive in a larger Yahoo organization that had, different issues and priorities. And, Volusion, it was just really some young people. They had great talent, but there was really young people, and I don't think they had the vision or the knowledge to know how to evolve. And it wasn't until the next generation formed, and the three real relevant next generation of SaaS companies. The first one would have been Demandware, and Demandware, which is enterprise only from the get-go, was basically Stefan Schambach took Intershop, a German enterprise platform, turned it into an sort of a modified version of SaaS, and they were the first true enterprise SaaS platform starting in like 03 or 04. By the way, they had the same venture Series A backer that BigCommerce did. So BigCommerce later, it was Larry Bond at General Catalyst, and even Stefan Schambach was involved, and they basically invested in BigCommerce on the thesis in 2011 that the world needed a Demandware for small and medium business. Right? Now, at that point in 2009, when we were founded, out
Brent,
of Sydney.
sorry to interrupt you, but I just want to, if it's okay, go a little
Yeah,
bit back to where to fully understand the path for you to, like you were saying, you were on management consulting, you were
yeah,
observing what was happening in the e-commerce space, you were seeing at some point in time, probably I think you said around 1998 or 1995, you had to make a decision where to continue, if you wanted to where you wanted to continue next steps. So after management consultant, where did you go? How did that path, your career
So
path,
I went
continue
to Escalate. I moved
to
from
Escalade?
Atlanta to Silicon Valley. I knew I wanted to be in Silicon Valley in the heart of e-commerce. I bet on SaaS. I bet on Escalate, and a year into it, I just didn't believe the company was going to be a winner long term, and I decided to just kind of quit cold because I didn't want to go down with a sinking ship, and I didn't even have a job search started. I just started a job search the day I quit. And again, I asked myself the question. It's now beginning of 2001. The bubble has burst. I'm still fully committed to e-commerce. And I asked myself the question that I asked a year before and got wrong. What one business model in all of e-commerce do I think is going to be most successful in at least the United States over the next couple of years? And that time I actually got it right, thinking about a 2-year or 3-year time horizon, and wrong for longer. I bet on eBay. And I bet on eBay because at the beginning of 2001, I believed that their traction and success in collectibles would expand to many, many, many more categories, to new products as well as old. And they had to go through a real e-commerce transformation, because at the time you could win an auction on eBay, but you couldn't pay for it very easily, right? It wasn't true e-commerce. Just winning an auction isn't true e-commerce. You had to
Right.
add the buy button and the checkout and all of that. And they had a fledgling service there that was maybe only 10% adoption. So I joined in '01 and joined as their, within the strategy team, but within a month I was the head of strategy. I was the only person in strategy. I was head of corporate strategy. And the only thing worth truly sharing is I did a bunch of work there that I'm proud of, but the main thing was in '02, my second year. They tasked me with leading a project with one other person to decide whether or not to buy PayPal, who was gaining traction on eBay as a checkout, or keep competing with them. And I had internet payments background from the 90s when I was a consultant. And I looked at it and I said, well, we could compete a lot better than we are today, but we should still buy them, because what they have created is far more revolutionary than just the plain Jane credit card processor that we're serving up. And so they bought PayPal in late 2002. And the main thing I would highlight here is I was pretty frustrated.
They bought it from Elon Musk.
No, it was a public company at that point, and Elon Musk had been out of the company for a couple of years.
Okay.
Yeah, it was Peter Thiel, CEO at the time. And a lot of the PayPal mafia were still there, but not Elon Musk.
Okay.
Well, it was a culture clash. And the two cultures just did not get along with each other. The eBay culture, a lot of MBAs and ex-consultants, kind of like me in terms of resume. And then the PayPal people were extraordinarily entrepreneurial, free-thinking, brilliant. There were so many geniuses there. But such a culture clash that when eBay bought them, nearly all of the PayPal team left. The leaders left, and they planned to leave. They weren't going to stick around and work for the MBAs and consultants. And I had this weird sort of opportunity at the time to go from one to the other. I had been frustrated working in the land of consultants and MBAs. I thought eBay had become far too analytical, far too risk averse, and not really customer focused, and certainly not innovative. And I was pretty frustrated. I might have left if we had not bought PayPal. I certainly don't think I would have stayed within eBay happily for a long time. But instead I moved over to PayPal and said, okay, now I'm going to be head of strategy at PayPal. And that gave me a new lease in life. I was there for almost 8 more years. For 3 years as head of global strategy at PayPal, then 4 years as head of Europe, living in Europe, and then final year was as head of global product management. And it was maybe in my career the thing that had the most impact, because in those early days at PayPal, I put together a strategy that ended up being our strategy for at least the next 8 years when I was there. And it was not the strategy eBay wanted when they bought PayPal. All eBay wanted was a checkout button on eBay. And I said, yeah, we're going to do that. That's 1/3 of our strategy. But then the next third of our strategy is to do the opposite. And that's go create a checkout button for everywhere else on the internet, merchant services. And then the final third of the strategy is to go global and go big global, go now global to Europe, to Asia, to all geographies.
So you had a part on that. You had a part on that, like a big part, a big role in. Wow, amazing! I didn't know that.
Oh, not only did I have a big part of it, it was hilarious. The CEO of eBay, who I really liked a lot and had a good relationship with, she was in total opposition to the merchant services part of this, and even the president of PayPal, who I liked a lot and had come over from eBay, he was saying to everybody, I don't want to hear anything about merchant services until we get penetration on eBay to 50%. And yet, in 2003, the year after we bought it, this is Express Checkout. When you go on a merchant website today and you see a PayPal button at the top of checkout, that's the Express Checkout button. And I was the guy who conceived of that, including its placement and the way it would work with the rest of checkout, got it named, got it funded. When the team didn't know how to build it, I went in and basically did a whole bunch of documentation around the APIs merchants use to integrate payment gateways. And I said, we have to emulate these APIs because we have to make the integration consistent with how they integrate a pure credit card processor. And oh, by the way, the other thing we're going to do is create a pure credit card processor. We need our own option because that will let small businesses pick PayPal for everything. The invisible credit card processing as well as the PayPal button at the top of checkout. So we called the combination of the two, putting both a PayPal button at the top and credit card processing at the bottom provided by PayPal Pro. And to get a world-class gateway, the first thing they did was buy VeriSign gateway, which at the time was, I think, the number 2 small business gateway after Authorize.net. And then later, after I left, they ended up buying, a great enterprise gateway in Braintree, as the next generation of pure credit card processing and alternative payments. But basically, that merchant services, which, eBay was saying, don't do that. Even people within PayPal were saying, don't do it. We did it anyway. We got it funded. We got it launched. It probably launched in early 04, maybe late 03. I can't remember. It was probably 04. And then you have to start doing business differently. You've got to start learning. If you want to go after ever bigger businesses, enterprises, you also need a sales force. You need business development. We had to go to the various platforms and get it integrated into them. And so one of the things that I got to know very well, especially in running PayPal in Europe for 4 years, were all the leading platforms. Because I told my team, job number 1 is to go to, in each of your respective countries, in France, in the UK, in Italy, in Germany, give me a rank order list, 1 through 10, of the leading platforms in the country. Then tell me, is PayPal integrated into each one of those? If so, what number are we? When you go to the platform and look at the list of integrated payment solutions, are we number 1? Are we number 5? Are we number 20? I want to get integrated and as close to number 1 on all of those as possible. BizDev, that's your job. And so we went out and started forming strong relationships with all the leading platforms, across Europe, but some of these platforms are global. And so my platform knowledge just kept expanding. And by the time I was done running Europe and came back in 2009, 2010 to Silicon Valley to run global product, Magento had been emerging, an open source. And we had seen that at PayPal from the very beginnings, the new president of PayPal really had his eyes set on it and said, that's the future of e-commerce. You know, maybe we should own that. And then they, of course, ended up buying Magento not long after I left in 2010. And so just fast forward, I went in 2010, I got lured away to run a company that I turned into what's today probably a $20 billion e-commerce business in the travel industry, HomeAway, VRBO. But when I got there, it was like eBay. When I got to eBay, you couldn't check out. There was no checkout button. You could inquire about a vacation house you wanted to rent, but there were no structured calendars, no structured rates, and no checkout button with payments. So we had to create all of that to turn HomeAway VRBO into real e-commerce. And you know, today I guess it's more than $20 billion annually of e-commerce, just like the eBay opportunity. And I did that for 5 years. We IPO'd it, ran as a successful public company before Expedia bought them. And shortly before Expedia bought them in 2015, I got the call from recruiters for BigCommerce. You know, BigCommerce was saying, our founders who live in Sydney, Australia, want to bring in a new CEO who's based in America, especially in Austin, Texas, where the company is headquartered, and I'm in Austin, Texas. Well, this is perfect. I've been doing e-commerce now for 20 years. I've been doing e-com platform technology and integrations and payments for most of those 20 years, you know, going back to 99, 2000. And I know how competitive the platform industry is. By 2015, there are more than 500 of them around the world. It's the one industry that I've been in and failed at. So I had the humility of knowing the odds of success, if we're 1 out of 500 platforms, are not high. And the only way we're going to win at BigCommerce and survive this very competitive industry is if we have a product and a strategy that is different and better than everyone else's, and we execute it really well. So, all right, I can handle the execution part. What's the strategy? And
so before we get into the strategy, Brent,
yeah.
Because everything that you're saying is like, I want to ask you a million things because it's amazing. But in regards to when you were approached from BigCommerce, in my mind, I thought that with all the things that you've done and all the things you have proved to the industry that you're capable of, that the founders of BigCommerce would approach to you. But what you said is that it was the recruiting team approached to you. Now there were multiple candidates for that spot at that time, like you were competing with others. Okay. So
there was one other good candidate, they said, a very different profile from mine, and located in San Francisco, not Austin, but we had a big office in San Francisco. So it kind of came down to the two of us, and you know, there were two big differences, three big differences between me and the other candidate. One is I had 10 times more e-commerce experience than that person. Two was we had a board member who had worked with me before and could personally vouch for me. But the big one was the board and the management team knew they needed a new strategy, because even though BigCommerce in 2015 had been quite successful and in 6 years grown from non-existent to the second biggest SaaS platform for small businesses in the world, number one was Shopify. Shopify had a 5-year head start. They had started in 2004. They had already IPO'd by the time that they were interviewing me. They were growing like a rocket ship, and we had no chance of, we weren't anywhere close to big enough to IPO then. We couldn't compete with their buzz and their traction, and they didn't know what to do. It's like, what do we do? Do we keep doing what we're doing, focused on SMBs? Do we go down market with a freemium model and compete against the GoDaddies and the WooCommerces of the world, or do we go up market? And they just didn't know. And I actually had what to me was a completely brain dead obvious thing that we needed to do, that the world needed us to do, that the world needed us to do. I said, look, it's 2015. The biggest platform in the world in 2015 by far was Magento, far bigger than Shopify. It was 20% share, small, medium, and large, B2C, B2B, all around the world. It was the 800-pound gorilla. Yeah. And I said, I know Magento really well because of that history. And I said, it's just a crime against business humanity that in the year 2015, the e-commerce industry has not given mid-market and enterprise customers a great SaaS alternative to owned, licensed, on-premise software. Whether it's open source like Magento or packaged software, almost no businesses want to have to buy, license, manage, secure, bug fix, version, integrate, host their own software. Almost no businesses, retail, brands, manufacturers, they don't want to do that. That's not what they're in business to do. It's expensive, it's hard, and you inevitably can't keep up. And yet, if you're mid-market or a large enterprise, all your top choices are that. It's Magento, IBM WebSphere, Oracle ATG, SAP Hybris. I mean, yes, there was Demandware, also at the very high end of the market, but let's just start with mid-market because Demandware wasn't serving the mid-market and neither were the SaaS platforms. The SaaS platforms like us and Shopify were all focused on SMBs. And I said, we have to expand up into the mid-market. That doesn't mean we abandon SMBs, it's just classic disruptive innovation. All disruptive innovation, textbook Clay Christensen, starts at the low end of the market with something cheaper, faster, and easier to use. That's what we had done. That's what some of the other SaaS platforms had done for SMBs. But you become disruptive when you then add functionality and add flexibility and performance, and you move up to the mid-market and say, I can serve you now too. I don't have 100% of the functionality of the market leader Magento, but I have the 80 or 90% that you need at a far lower cost, and in our case, a far cheaper business model because running us in SaaS was so much cheaper than what it took to implement and manage Magento or any other on-premise software. So that was the thesis. I came in and I told the board in every interview, if you make me CEO, day one, I'm not going to waste 3 seconds interviewing the market, interviewing customers, interviewing partners. Day one, I come in and announce our target is no longer Shopify and competing against Shopify and the other SaaS platforms for SMBs. We're going to go create the first world-class SaaS platform for the mid-market. And then once we've done that, we're going to extend up into large enterprise and we'll take on Demandware. And remember, I had a board member who was the founding investor in both companies. He's on both boards and he's like, you can't compete with Demandware. They're way too upmarket for you. And I said, I promise you, give me 3 years and we'll be taking customers away from them, which we were doing, 3 years later.
It seems that you manage year after year to bring your strategic vision and cascade that to the rest. But like you just mentioned with the board, you had to convince them that you were capable of doing that. Have you ever felt like the team wasn't aligned? Because on our side, for example, we always think that we have a strategic vision, that everyone needs to be aligned, that we are pursuing certain goals, and that's what we try to also do with our customers, our merchants that don't necessarily have a strategic vision for the next year or 3 years, and that it's very important to understand what they are trying to accomplish. Have you ever seen yourself in that situation, or maybe doubt about yourself? And I don't think you are the kind of guy that has an imposter syndrome, but maybe I'm not too, or I might be wrong, and this might not be the right choice for us. Have you ever felt like that?
Oh, of course. Just not, that wasn't the experience at Big Commerce. So, but I absolutely yes to that throughout my career. At Big Commerce, the board and the management team, when they heard that plan, they wouldn't have hired me if they didn't buy into it.
Of course.
And I would, I think they would agree that there's been 100% alignment from day one. Now, we've shifted the nuance over time. That mix of like, well, how much are we still focused on small business versus mid-market versus now enterprise has shifted over time as our capabilities have grown. And we had to build out the functionality and the composable openness to earn our way ever up market. But there's never been any misalignment with the board or the management team at Big Commerce. In contrast, tons of conflict and misalignment, going back to eBay and PayPal. I gave you the example of when I walked into PayPal and they said, all right, Brent, help us come up with our post-acquisition strategy. And, an anchor component of it was going and serving all the off-eBay merchants around the world that competed with eBay. So there was colossal misalignment there. It was like universally opposed by people who were on the eBay side. And it was, semi-opposed by the president of PayPal, but he still didn't stop us from doing it. And, that's why, PayPal today is 100 times bigger than when it was bought. Whereas on eBay, it's not even processing their core payments any longer. Right? It's not even processing the core payments. Adyen is now. PayPal might still be an option, but that saved PayPal. And if I hadn't been that person and stood up and just not taken no for an answer, they would have never done that, and PayPal would be an afterthought. Now, all right, maybe I'm giving myself too much credit, but that was sort of the reality that I lived in. I felt like unbelievable opposition, and I just didn't cave to it. I also had a lot of opposition when I was head of strategy at eBay on a couple of topics where I just disagreed with far more senior people within the eBay organization about whether eBay back in 2001, 2, and 3 should be growing its top line primarily by creating value or extracting value for merchants. And there were people there that wanted to grow by extracting value, meaning raising prices. And I made strong arguments that that's not the best way for us to do it, which I won 1 year of, but because 1 year they didn't do price increases, but at huge personal cost. I created a lot of enemies within the eBay organization because of that. And then when I moved over to PayPal, they went back to the price increases. And I think that was the beginning of the real decline of eBay, because they had a strong, vibrant merchant seller community who every 6 months was getting a giant price increase, and they really turned on eBay. They lost the evangelism and they lost the support, and I think that was ultimately a mistake. And I could do it. I could do it at HomeAway too. There were I led that company in a direction that everybody supported, but by the end of my 5 years there were things that others direction they wanted to go in, and I wasn't excited to go in that. I won't get into details, but I wasn't excited to go in. And frankly, it was a good thing that Big Commerce came along, and I left because that freed up the rest of the folks to go in a direction that's been very successful for them. And I can point to times when I was wrong. There were 3 times in my 10 years at eBay and PayPal where I had a boss telling me, we're about to fire you, Brent, because I was standing up for controversial things. And all 3 of those times I said, okay, fire me if you want to, but I think that's a dumb decision. I'm not the decision maker here. I'm just advocating for a decision. And if somebody else makes a decision that's against what I stand up for, fine. Then it's up to me to decide whether I stay or not. But, if you're saying you're going to fire me just because I'm disagreeing with somebody else in the debate on what to do, that's a dumb reason to fire me. But go ahead if you really want to, because I can go work somewhere else. I bring this up not to praise myself. It's actually to criticize myself, because 2 of those 3 times I was completely, right, and we got my way. And one of those 3 times I was completely wrong. They did the opposite, and then I was proven to be wrong. My only point here is that we all make mistakes. We'll all face opposition. We all have to make choices about how much to stand up for controversial things. And, I guess one of the lessons is I've stood up for controversial things and had a really big impact on companies in the world because of that. I've also ruffled feathers and created enemies and, multiple times been dead wrong and proven to be dead wrong.
Well, you cannot be disruptive if you're not controversial at some point. So it's part of
Well, yeah, and also it's we are going through some controversial times right now. Just like you mentioned in the 90s when, the internet erupted, and now with the whole AI and ChatGPT, everything what's going on there. Today, I was reading in the New York Times that Dr. Jeffrey Hinton, who's called the godfather of AI, left Google and warns about the danger of ahead, and how this could fall into the wrong hands. So, you have a vision and you usually are know where to go. At least you have an idea on what's coming ahead. What's your vision with all the AI disruption and ChatGPT? Have you used ChatGPT, and how do you think it will disrupt the e-commerce market?
This is a funny story. So, what was it? Maybe a year and a half ago, our board, we had a couple new board members come in, and they said, let's do a strategy update for the new board members and all of us. Come in and present the strategy. So we came in and presented the strategy. It was an updated version of what it had been since I arrived in 2015. And at the end of it, the board said, well, we really like this strategy, but the one thing that's conspicuous by its absence, where is AI and ML? That seems like it would be really, really important, for, if nothing else, things like product recommendation engines and other things. So that sparked a good conversation. And what I said at the time was, I completely agree with you that it is conspicuous in its absence here. And I'm putting aside our other company, Feedonomics, which is, basically run the Igor Roytson there is maybe the foremost AI person in the whole world of e-commerce catalog technology. I mean, that business has the best AI built into it of any e-commerce business, period, in the world. But it's a narrow application of, basically transforming and optimizing catalog feeds into search engines, ad channels, marketplaces, etc. For the core platform and the AI built into it, what I said to the board was, look, it's my belief that AI is extremely hard. It's a very limited number of absolutely brilliant people that can come up with the best AI models. And we at BigCommerce are not fundamentally an AI company. We can't hire and retain those people. We're going to get outbid. So at the time, if you looked at our big competitors, IBM had been doing AI for a long time with Watson. Salesforce had started doing it with Einstein. Adobe started doing it with Sensei. They're spending tens of millions of dollars hiring, genius PhDs from the top schools who really specialize. We can't compete with them. We don't have tens of millions of dollars to spend on AI. And what I said to the board is what we need to do is beat them by being open when they're closed. If you go use Adobe, you have one and only one AI solution, and it's whatever they create for Sensei. And they may not even be focused on e-commerce applications of AI. So you're kind of stuck. If you go to IBM and they've got all the Watson AI, well, they may not have good applications for e-commerce. And you're still going to spend a fortune to use it, and you don't have the choice of whatever else is out there. Same with Salesforce. And I said, rather than trying to create a proprietary and inferior solution, to compete against our conglomerate competitors, let's be open. Let's go find the best startups and the best innovators in AI, and let's integrate and partner with them. All right? So if you go back in time 2 years ago, 2011, it's not obvious that they're out there. Like if you go out into the e-commerce ecosystem, how many apps, product recommendation widgets, etc., that are truly driven by world-class AI are in the marketplaces 2 years ago? Magento's marketplace, our marketplace, Shopify's marketplace, the open marketplaces. There weren't many.
Not too many.
And then within the last 6 months, everything has changed. Because in the last 6 months, suddenly OpenAI, ChatGPT comes along, Bard comes along from Google, and now my engineers can spend 3 days in a hackathon and come up with better integrated new functionality for AI and ML, leveraging either ChatGPT or OpenAI or Bard, which are the best learning models on the planet right now, than anything that has ever been at Adobe, IBM, or Salesforce. All of the tens and tens of millions of dollars that they've spent on those proprietary things are instantly outdated. And you don't want to be a company stuck with them where they're trying to catch up and try to make one of their proprietary things compete against the others. You want to be open where BigCommerce is, because whether if you're one of our customers or you're one of our agencies, you can spend 24 hours. Like we have running prototypes of ChatGPT using all of the knowledge base within BigCommerce to now publish AI answers to customer questions. You can type in a query question, and better than even a support rep who doesn't have every word of every document we've ever published internally in her head and able to spit out within seconds a near perfect answer, ChatGPT can do that. And we have, working prototypes. Also working prototypes. If you're one of our customers and you want help writing a title, a description, or coming up with background imagery for any given product listing, we've got working prototypes of ChatGPT to do that. We're working with Bard and Google on recommendation engines and other things. So whether it's BigCommerce doing it or partners like you doing it or our customers, it is now trivially easy to incorporate better AI, ML solutions, and those two in particular, that have ever existed before. And BigCommerce didn't have to spend a penny on AI, ML expertise, PhDs, etc. to do that. We just had to stay open, and we got lucky because all of a sudden it fell into our laps. Now, that's the positive side of what merchants can do with AI, ML right now, and how easy it is to take advantage. And I think it's going to transform a number of areas of e-commerce. First of all, product recommendations and recommendation engines are now going to be far better than they've ever been before, and cheaper and easier to use. We expect those to be coming out and really innovating within our apps marketplace. I think the tools merchants have to write descriptions will be great, for products or improved descriptions. I think knowledge bases that we will turn around and incorporate into our customer service to make it that much better. And again, it's not taking intelligence away from BigCommerce, because the AI and ML models can't get their answers right if we don't do the documentation first for them to work with. But what that they're very good at is then matching a real query, a live language query from a customer or a partner, and then knowing everything that's written in the documentation and spitting out, the best possible answer to that question. right? And you can still call a customer service rep at BigCommerce, but even the customer service reps, if they don't themselves perfectly know the answer to a customer query, the fastest way for them to tap into all the knowledge will then be probably to type it into an AI query and get the answer back. So they'll be using it themselves if a customer calls, rather than the customer using it themselves. Those are just at least 3 ways that it will transform e-commerce in my estimation. Now, there are all sorts of other questions around AI, ML, and those questions have their own both exciting and terrifying ramifications. But everything I've just talked about, I don't see anything but positives for the world.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's a reality nowadays, and everyone can do it basically, because you used to need to know a lot of coding, and right now it's accessible almost to anyone. So, and I can see the race to understanding, how to do the right prompts, how to use it, how to create that profile of the person that you want to talk to, or the AI that you want to talk to, and being an expert consultant and all that. So it's one more piece of how I like to call it when we talk to merchants. It's putting the puzzle together. We have all the different pieces. We have BigCommerce as a strong e-commerce platform. We have NetSuite as the ERP. We have AI. We have our rewards program. And merchants not necessarily know how to connect all that, and that's when we see that we can bring a lot of value in connecting the dots to putting the puzzle together. And definitely BigCommerce, it's open, as you said, and it's helping merchants that see that achieve it. So
but wasn't it kind of curious that how the world reacted to this? Like you were saying 2 years ago, you were having this strategy discussion about we need some AI component, right, in the strategy. So you were kind of aware, but I'm wondering if you were at the level of what happened in November. So not because ChatGPT went out and everyone now, as you said, you went to the marketplaces and now there are tons of many solutions using AI. The conversations in the with your friends, family, everyone's talking about AI. But this was something that was going on before November, obviously. What happened? Like to me, is the reaction is like too wild. It's like suddenly we realized that we've been developing AI, but we've been developing AI for years.
But it got democratized. That's the big difference, because AI before then, again, it's unbelievably expensive to create good AI. You need genius level problem solvers, programmers, and who can hire those people? Well, it comes really a startup maybe, but none of these were startups. They were all funded either by mega cap software companies. They were all funded by mega cap software, even OpenAI. Like, Elon Musk was a backer of it. Microsoft was a backer of it. It's now owned by Microsoft. What Google did, these are mega cap companies. But what was different is OpenAI, they opened it up. It started as a nonprofit. Then they needed to, convert to a for-profit to get enough investment to pay for all the computing power, et cetera. But they opened it to the world. So it's the combination of opening it to the world and the advancements in the quality of the models. The models just suddenly reached a tipping point where each version is so much better than anything that had been created before, and we can use it. Like, I remember getting home one day, I'd already been following these developments, but I get home, had no idea my kids were. It's December. My 15-year-old son says, "Hey, Dad, come check this out." He has a high school essay on some topic in 400 words, and he just types that prompt into ChatGPT, and out pops an essay that, in terms of writing quality and intelligence, is probably would have gotten at least an A minus, if not an A. Just depends how good the kids are in the class and competing. It was a great answer. And the horrible thing about that is that's not what you want, because you can't. My son, I want him thinking, learning how to think. I want him learning the subject matter, and I want him learning how to write and argue. So all overnight, at that day in December, a teacher in his high school can no longer assign work to be done at home, which was the only thing that happened during the lockdowns of the pandemic. So suddenly ChatGPT made what we did in the pandemic of remote learning, remote test taking, remote assignments no longer viable, because you can't just let every student type in a ChatGPT question and get an answer back that is a instant A minus.
Yeah.
They're now going to have to go into in-class assignments, in-class writing, in-class tests, just like, I had when I was growing up. They're going to have to go back to that, because otherwise every kid can just do ChatGPT and no longer have to think. It's a radical. The changes that are going to happen are radical, and there'll be a lot of good things, but there'll be a lot of bad things too. Like, you could imagine somebody saying, well, I'm going to use ChatGPT as a productivity tool, and I'm going to have ChatGPT writing a lot of my email responses, which it could certainly do. The problem is, every time you use ChatGPT to do any task for you, you are basically saying the knowledge that would have been required to do that task, I'm no longer going to gain or refresh, and the thought process of answering that task, I'm no longer going to do and build that muscle and that capability. And humans are going to rapidly become a lot dumber in a subset of the things, the tasks that they ask ChatGPT to do for them. Now, on the flip side, there are a whole bunch of questions that in the old days might have been too hard to get the answer to, things you could have learned but didn't, that you'll now go to ChatGPT and get an answer to. But I've been using Google that way for years, and I don't know how much better ChatGPT will be than Google was. It takes more time on Google, because you get all these links, you got to figure out which link to read. Sometimes you're reading 5 or 10 links, rather than relying on a simple answer, which is what ChatGPT gives you. So ChatGPT is going to give better answers faster than Google did. But you're also going to lose one of the things you got from Google, which is seeing different information sources, evaluating the information sources, extracting from them the answer that you're looking for, evaluating which to use. There's a lot of intelligence you're going to lose from the more efficient way to gain knowledge via ChatGPT. I don't know. It's
like with ChatGPT, you assume that that's the answer. That's it. You don't go through, at least with Google, you go through the process of understanding, okay, what's the source? Who's saying this? Is it valid, not valid? This is it. And it's very disrupting. And what I also see is that when you do something that, you put your thought and write it and do documentation and send it to someone, the other person might think, hey, he did it with ChatGPT. He couldn't be this good. And I'm finding myself in those situations, like, okay.
That's imposter syndrome that you were talking about.
Yeah, the ChatGPT, it's a great tool, but it's not necessarily 100% right all the time. And we can see that nowadays. But it's like,
it keeps getting better, right? And so when we go to 4.5 and 5, the accuracy, that's a temporary problem with it.
Yeah.
I think the bigger problem is, I just imagine this analogy. So if a lot of people are now getting excited about using ChatGPT to perform a whole bunch of thinking tasks that they would other have to do in their jobs. Imagine the analogy. What happens if you could find somebody else or something else to perform your exercise tasks for you that were necessary, to exercise your body every day, or to eat your vegetables for you? Do you actually get healthier if you outsource eating your vegetables or doing your workouts?
No.
You don't get healthier. Are you going to get healthier and smarter and stronger by outsourcing your thinking to ChatGPT? Maybe in some ways, but I think in more ways not. And my fear is that a lot of people will start using ChatGPT, and rather than by using it in ways that make them smarter, they instead stop thinking as much, stop learning as much, and it could actually be a strange point where this encourages, sort of the opposite of evolution. It makes it easier for people to not need to be smart.
I think that in regards to if it's better for evolution, my take is we're only seeing we're right in the middle of this hurricane, right? But the changes in humanity, if you see the evolution of humanity, it takes much larger periods, right, of hundreds of years where you see the evolution of humanity. And but the fact that we are only living this life right now and that we're seeing what's happening right now is we're saying, wow, we are getting, scared about all the bad things that happen. But to me, my opinion, what's going to happen is that as time goes by, we're going to find a ways to lean it to a more positive way, and hopefully not distract ourselves in the middle. But we'll change it. We'll evolve with that. From a conscious level as well.
I'm normally an optimist, but I also understand why some people are freaking out because they've never seen anything evolve its capabilities this quickly. Mm-hmm. That's what we've seen AI in the last 6 months.
And I think that's the speed. It's what scares us the most. It's just unparalleled from what I've seen all these years.
Hey, changing topics. Since we talked a lot about strategy today, and there's obviously a lot of small business and medium-sized business merchants hopefully listening to this episode. I would like to see if we can go through how to do strategy or recommendations or tips. For example, I always tell this story. In 2019 we started doing some, I don't know if it's called strategic planning strategy, something around those, that concept we started doing here at Tavano. And before that, it was me, I was the CEO at that time. It was I want to go this way, and I explained to the team, hey, to the leadership team, we need to go this way because of this and that. And I thought that they understood exactly what I had to say, and they would say, yeah, I understood, and we were going that way. But at some point in the middle, they were going somewhere else, and kind of losing focus to where I was hoping that we would be heading to. That's the only way that I knew how to run a team, a business, Now in 2019, when we started doing this strategic planning, Gonzalo, who is a longtime friend of ours that came to work with us as a consultant, and he brought this process to the table. And at that point, we sat with the leadership team, and we sat there a couple of days doing strategy sessions, and the strategy was designed by the leadership team, not by me. And I was blown away by the results of that, because now everyone was fully on committed to going towards those goals that they helped design, that they designed. We all designed it. To me, that was a pivotal moment, really, in how to run teams and business. And obviously, the cons of that is that maybe we don't go exactly to where I thought originally that we needed to go, but I rather be full on something that we are all committed to than slow and painfully going through something that I wanted to.
Yeah.
So that's like, for example, something that I don't see that strategy, methodology, or type of work within many of, for example, of our customers that we work with, like because all strategy is a word that you can use it for a lot of projects, initiatives, but overall company strategy, that way of doing the strategy fully on with the leadership team all together, that was really something that I recommend. Now, I wonder, you've been so many teams and organizations, if you have any recommendations and tips on how to do strategy.
I don't think there's a single right way, and I don't
Yeah.
think there's a single right way because people have different personality types. They have different ways of thinking. Just to give you an example, if you've ever taken Myers-Briggs tests for your personality type, one of the dimensions is the intuition versus sensing. People who have a personality type that are high on the sensing side of things like lots of data, and they have a hard time getting convinced of a theory and having conviction of a theory unless they've done enormous amounts of research and data and testing. Whereas people are heavy on the intuition side, like ideas. They like, and they can get really excited about an idea that feels right and makes sense to them with very little analysis, right? And so that's just one dimension. What type of process works best for a person or a group of people can differ based on your own mode of thinking and your own personality type. What I learned how to do in consulting, which was taught to me before I knew how to do anything myself, is, McKinsey and the other consulting firms are hypothesis driven. They don't do it the way you described. They would not walk into a client and say, we're going to run a whole bunch of brainstorming or problem solving sessions and try to derive a plan or a strategy as a result of consensus problem solving. Instead, what they would do is have gathered enough information in the background that they would arrive to start a project with a hypothesis. And then the goal is to quickly test the hypothesis and maybe alternative hypotheses. But you're always testing hypotheses to say, well, this is what we think the best answer is today. And by asserting that answer, you give people a chance to challenge it, come up with a better idea, come up with conflicting data, come up with alternatives. And then as you hear those challenges or counters, you don't ignore them. You've got to either validate or refute them as you go along to try to systematically do things. So the way I have done it at, especially at PayPal, HomeAway, and BigCommerce, in all three of those cases, the first thing I did when I walked in as head of strategy at PayPal, when I walked in as chief operating officer at HomeAway, and when I walked in as CEO at BigCommerce, the first day I said is, we'll have a full strategy decided and communicated to the organization within the next 2 months. And my working hypothesis as of today is that this is what it is. Here are the pillars of that strategy. I give everybody something to react to. And what I found in all three cases is that people looked at that initial strategy and it made so much sense to them that they quickly got comfort that this was not like boiling the ocean or a chaotic process. There's a working hypothesis that didn't seem wrong to them to begin with. And then what you do over the 2 months is you validate it. You work with people, you flesh it out, you tweak and refine and improve it. Now, this could be really bad if you start with a bad hypothesis and don't have a good one waiting in the wings to replace it. But that's how I do strategy. I start with a hypothesis and then validate it, test it, prove it, or disprove it, and decide not to do that. Then you got to come up with a better one.
Makes sense.
Yeah,
Nice.
and the good thing, and talking a bit about our experience here and why we choose, to develop our relationship with BigCommerce and all that, is because it allows us to remove all the technical difficulties that other platforms have, like you mentioned, upgrades, maintenance cost. I don't want merchants calling us to change the color of a button because they cannot do it themselves, that kind of stuff. So we try to solve all those problems by choosing the right e-commerce platform for them. We developed our connector Big Synapse for BigCommerce and NetSuite merchants. So right now we are seeing that the NetSuite merchants can leverage all the connectivity that we can give them and grant them access to, and not worry about the technical stuff and focus on growth and strategy thinking. But it takes time for them to shift from one mindset to from a fixed mindset to a growth mindset. So are you seeing this? Is this part of your strategic vision also, helping those type of merchants?
100%. Like, the best part about being on SaaS, whether it's SaaS ERP like NetSuite, SaaS ecom platform like BigCommerce, is the primary burden of coming up with new functionality to make your website experience better and new integrations into third parties is not your job. That's our job, right? The software, the SaaS provider. And every month we come with new features, new integrations, new things you can do to make your site better. Your job gets to focus on your customer and, what do we take advantage of? What does our customer want most? But in most cases, what you want to do can be done if you're on a market-leading SaaS platform. AI comes along, and you're like, oh no, what am I going to do with AI? Well, you can, like I just said, it's so easy to incorporate, right? We'll incorporate some of it at BigCommerce for you. Agencies like you can incorporate it if a customer wants to do something that we haven't done. Third-party apps will do it. But you're always thinking about, how do I innovate? And you're not stuck on, oh man, I'm going to be on NetSuite for the next 5 years, but then we'll outgrow it and we'll have to replatform. You're not going to outgrow NetSuite. You're not going to outgrow BigCommerce. It can be decisions for life that you never regret because the platforms themselves keep getting better. That's not true of every SaaS solution, but that's true when you find that right intersection of the best in the market for your needs. Usually whatever's the best in the market for your needs is a company that's earned that through quality and they can stay there. Not that NetSuite doesn't have competition, but they're really good. And once you're on it, you're probably never going to need to leave. And for sure, I say to customers on BigCommerce, it's my goal not only that you never need to leave, but we, power your growth and success and operation for years and decades to come. That's the goal.
So, yeah, go, Rodrigo. Sorry, you were going to say something?
No, what I was gonna ask you, it's I know you were heavily focusing also on the B2B space. So how is that coming along? Because there are a lot of B2B merchants in NetSuite, and taking advantage of what BigCommerce can offer. But
Yeah, well, I'm glad we're having this podcast today rather than 2 days ago, because yesterday on May 1st was when we announced the release of our new buyer portal and upgraded version of our B2B edition. It is absolutely amazing. Anybody who does B2B selling, I encourage you to take a look at the buyer portal experience. The feedback we're getting from our agency partners who've looked at it say it's the best on the market. And by buyer portal, what I mean is when your B2B buyer comes, logs in, sees their account permissions, see their order history, has the interactive tools for purchasing process. It's a gorgeous, really B2C-like experience, but custom made for B2B buyers and sellers. We've also upgraded B2B Edition. It's now theme agnostic, meaning you can use B2B Edition and that experience with any theme, a custom theme, a headless theme, whereas in the original days, you had to choose from 5 or 6 themes that were modified for B2B Edition. It's now agnostic. It's compatible with multi-storefront, and our multi-storefront functionality lets our customers click a button and add another storefront. Another storefront could be for additional brand or sub-brand, an additional customer segment, or an additional geography. If you're on enterprise, you can have many different storefronts all up and operating on a single account. So you could have one integration in your account with NetSuite, but spin up lots of additional stores. Many B2B customers are finding that really good. Some are selling B2B and B2C on different storefronts, different customer experiences, all one set of integrations, all one account. So very easy to operate. Our goal is to be the best and biggest B2B e-commerce platform in the world. And, our main competitor is Magento, which is on-premise software. So there's no reason we can't do that. And it's already the case today. Last time I checked, I went into G2 where businesses rate their software around the world. And if you go to e-com platforms and click the B2B button, saying I'm a B2B seller, we were the only platform in the upper right, meaning by far the most popular and the highest rated B2B platform in the world, which I'm really excited about. Because customers are already telling us that they like us better than the alternatives. And, we're just getting started. We have so many more things we'll be doing to keep making our B2B capabilities, better than anybody's ever received before from a SaaS platform. There are on-premise platforms that can do more than we can, and they'll end up costing you 5 times as much and saddle you with the burden of managing and securing and hosting your own software. But to get the user experience of SaaS, the value proposition of SaaS, operational built-in security, and really gorgeous B2C-like user experiences, that's what we're trying to bring to the world of B2B.
Love to hear.
Great, Brent. Great. So I know we're coming to the end of the episode, and time flies, as Diego always says on this podcast. The other Diego. So we wanted to really thank you again for spending time with us today, and being able to share your experience, your stories that are really, really very inspiring in many of those, and some of the things that we learned today that I didn't know about you, that you had a big role in PayPal checkout and pay button that had so much impact in all over the world. So I think it was a great episode, and I want to thank you for that, and thank you also for the relationship with our agency, and look forward to see what comes next from BigCommerce.
Well, I really enjoyed partnering with you at Tavano, and I am honored that you would invite me onto your podcast. I hope the listeners enjoyed it. There was something in there for an hour and a half of your time to reward it, and may we keep growing and serving a lot of great businesses together. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Brent.
Brent.
Take care.